Yep, so all of you who are joining us across social media right now, we are broadcasting out of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs Facebook page and also on the webinar. And you can join us on either or any one of our cross-posting partners out there. We have great partners who we share content with, and all of our partners are doing such amazing things during this time period. So I encourage all of you to go and visit their sites. Yeah, our friends over at Kanaiokana, at Iwi TV, at Mana Maoli, at the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement. They're all over, all over the place right now in this hour. And just so that you guys know which show you guys are tuning into right now, this is Aloha Rising. Show that we have started back, I believe in April, May, gearing up for the primary elections here in Hawaii. And now this is our second part of the series that we'll be discussing issues of concern to our lahui, issues that um, help our communities get more informed on how to civically engage with issues that are important to themselves, their families, their communities, and for the greater good of Hawaii. As you all know, our general elections are coming up. You should all be receiving your ballots in your homes in and around October 16th or so. We know from the primary elections that the ballots are dropped a little bit earlier than originally planned, so can anticipate that also. And know too that right before the ballots drop, Aloha Rising and the Office of Hawaiian Affairs will be hosting a candidate forum, for the OHA candidates, for the Office of Hawaiian Affairs trustee candidates. And we'll have 3 races featured. We'll have the candidates for Hawaii Island trustee, for Molokai Island trustee, and also the at-large trustees. They will all be facing off during that week. It's that week previous to the balance dropping. We'll have more information soon about exactly which day and which time they will be held. So look forward to that. This is very interesting times, and but what it also is, not only interesting times, it is probably the easiest time in the history, in a modern history of Hawaii, that you can civically engage, that you can vote, right? And there is information out there. We're putting out content and information. We have partners who are putting out, content and information to help you make the best decisions for yourself and your ohana. Yeah. So we're right about 2 o'clock right now, and I'd like to formally welcome all of you. And again, if you've just joined us, please let us know where you're coming in from. Yeah, we see a nice group of, a few dozen already joined us in the Zoom room, in the chat room here. So if you can let us know where you're from already. We have Ohana from Renton, Washington, up there in Wakinekona, and Ottawa, Canada. And then also all the way in Kea'au, Hawaii, yeah, along with Denver, Colorado, which is a place one of our guests here spent, a lot of time in that state. In fact, doing the work that we'll be talking about today. Oh, and yes, we have one other person besides myself from Palolo, Hawaii, Palolo Oahu, Oiahoi, Kapiko o Kahonua. So aloha mai kako, all of you from throughout Hawaii Pai'aina and throughout Haumea and Honua. Yeah. We welcome you today to Aloha Rising. We have a great program for you today. Not because I'm going to have the honor and privilege of talking about an incredibly important subject that is usually, hard for people to talk about. harder 20 years ago, but hopefully with all the work that's been done to bring forward our care and responsibility for our iwi kupuna, hopefully that conversation is a lot easier now, right? And I'm going to be sitting today with two people who have made it their life's work, to do this, in different ways, right? And in very different ways. So yeah, you guys are in for a treat. And also, I want you guys to keep note of if you've never heard about the issues surrounding our ancestral remains, our iwi kupuna, our iwi kapu. Hopefully, this will be a very enlightening broadcast today. If you have, right? Hopefully, this will be an elevating conversation, right? Where what you know and understand was hopefully elevated during this conversation here. And know that this is not where that discussion ends. Yeah, this is just bringing it to all of you to continue the discussions that people have already been having, and for some of you to welcome you to the discussion. So we'd like to start off today. I want to bring Kumuhina on to do a velina words through that we usually do either through pule, our chant, or mele. And I'd like to bring her forward to be able to share something with us. Yeah, Kumuhina.
Oh yeah. Ke aloha nui a kākou a pauloa e ke anaina e ka lehulehu, e nakanaka na kamaaina na malihini. Ia o koa pauloa e kipa mai nei mai ko o mauahi. E ho'onenea nei no ka ho'olohea ho'onenea mai I ke iwahi papahana. Ke aloha aina nui no I a o koa pauloa. Aloha kākou.
Aloha.
Ai, mahalo. Mai ka moku o ke awe. Mai Hawaii nui a kea, a hiki loa I ke onenani o Niihau a ke helelani. Ke aloha nui a kākou. He mele keia e ho'ohano nei I nā kūpuna o kākou. A o ka inoa ia mele nei o ia no o e ola nā oiwi aloha aina. Aloha e ku'ua ne hanau e mauloa I ka malama. A pula mamau I ka lei ho'oheno. Lei hano a o nā kupuna. E ola nā o iwi E ona iwi, a o ku'u iwi, o ke koko, a o ku'u koko, me ke ewe, a o ku'u ewe, me ke ewe, a o ku'u ewe, e ala, mai e ku'u lahui na koa o ke aloha aina ku kia I mau e nā mamo aloha e kule ana like kako e ola nā o iwi e ona iwi a o ku'u iwi o ke koko, o ku'u koko, me ke ewe, a o ku'u ewe, me ke ewe, a o ku'u ewe, na ka ike ku, puna ka kou e ola I ka ai ka maha o ka aina. Aloha he o ku'u hai o ka lana kila, ku'u hai Hawaii I ua ka ulana. E ola nā o iwi e ona iwi, a o ku'u iwi. O ke koko, a o ku'u koko, me keve a oku uewe me keve a oku uewe no leila e ke anai na ka koe launa nei ka leo mahalo me ka leo aloha ho ike e a ka koe pauloa mahalo nui a oko ko oko ki pa ana mai mahalo no ke wahi manawa a mako e launa i me oko no leila ke aloha nui aloha aloha aloha
Ua nani, ua mahalo nui ya oe e kumuhina ma ke la mele, ua maika'i no. Ho'okahi manawa wale no e a'u mai e pa'a kana au ke ia mele no ke la ano leo, he aha ke ano o ke la leo.
leo ha'a
O ka leo ha'a ua maika'i loa. O ia ko'u lalani kekahi, right? Ka ha'a ana ua maika'i no. A kela ano melody, yeah? Like ua nani maika'i no. So mahalo no ho'i. No ke ia launa ana, yeah? Me ka lehu, me ka la mele. Yeah, so mahalo. So everyone, yep, that was our, if you don't know already, that was of course Kumu Hinaleimoana Wong. And she serves as a dual purpose. She's a staff member with us in our community outreach division here at the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, and so put this panel or this presentation together. But she also has served in various capacities regarding the Iwi Kupuna issue, which she'll talk about, and actually where we want to encourage people to participate in also. And I always like to throw this in because I still think it's a big deal. Kumuhina is one of only of 3 Hawaiians who have, their film on Netflix. Yeah, it's Kumuhina, Jason Momoa, and Keanu Reeves. Right? That's it. That's our our superstars to the famous. But what's so important about that is that Kumuhina's presence on that platform. I don't want to blow up Netflix on because they don't need it, right? They don't need a commercial from Mehana in order to succeed. But what I think is really important is that story is being shared now in all over the world, right? Not only here in Hawaii, but all over the world, and that's important. That's very important, and kudos for all that work. And she's also made other animated films. One that due to COVID, I don't think had the opportunity to get out, as far as we wanted to, but will do so, soon. It's been shared out, yeah. Yeah, and that film is Kapai Mahu, and it's an animated short. So yeah, it's already won an award, but yeah, it's been sent to the film festivals, I believe. Yeah, Hina.
Yes, it's been making rounds. So
okay.
Part of the reason why it makes its rounds is so that way the festivals are able to enter it into those categories. And, when people like them and honor them, then they get to, if there's any awards to be received, then,
right.
And then it
goes out to everybody. Yeah, awesome. Good work there. And I like to show that too, because sometimes when we focus so much, our identity is focused so much with our work that some people forget that we are creative beings, that we do other things where most of us, except for Halealoha, we're just mere mortals, here on, just we walk on the ground, we don't float like Halealoha. But yeah, so I always want to bring that kind of context into this discussions, and just add a little bit more of who these kanaka are that we bring forward, And speaking of Halealoha, so our guest today is, Halealoha Ayau, from the island of Molokai, and born and bred there, but of course reared on the slopes of Kapalama, for intermediate and high school, and then of course went off into college and did some amazing things at a very young age, to help and he'll tell this story too, but to help establish what it is that we know of today as those protections and not only here in Hawaii, but it has had national, his work has rippled across the United States, then rippled across the world as setting precedents for how it is that people around the world build that sense of humanity within themselves in order to do the right thing for our ancestral needs, and not just Hawaiian ones, everyone's ancestral remains, so he's been probably the most influential single individual in this world. And I don't say that just because I'm biased, right? There's a lot of other stories I can tell about Halealoha Ayau, but this is true. I know this from a policy standpoint. I know this from a practitioner and cultural practitioner standpoint. And I know this from all the other a multiplicity of parts that it takes in order to have the most positive effect on our iwi kupuna, right? The most pono effects on our iwi kupuna. I know what that work looks like, and I know what it's done, for many, many people around the world and here in Hawaii also. So we have him joining us today, and these two, between Kumuhina and Halealoha, we are going to have a great discussion. We're gonna, a presentation for Kumuhina, just to talk about the nuts and bolts of and I said it takes a lot of parts in order to make up what ends up happening to our iwi kupuna here in Hawaii. Kumuhina is gonna go into detail about one of those parts, and that part is the part where the community, the families, the descendants from your areas, where it is that your families come from and where it is that you reside. This is where you get to intersect with that process, right? You become the nexus for that process. So, and we've not really done this before, we haven't done a great job of, and no fault to the staff, that have to help pay this work, but it's just easier now with the modes of, being able to do webinars, being able to have things archived and at everybody's fingertips, so we're going to take advantage of those tools, that, are here in 2020, to hopefully engage all of you who have concern, for our iwi kupuna, but never knew how to be able to positively impact the processes that deal with our ancestral remains, and or you did, right, but you wanted to get more like training, more details, like what is that kuleana? What does that kuleana look like, right? And what I've been walking around and hinting about, right, is the island burial councils, right? So that's a significant piece to the process, right? And we're gonna have Kumuhina kind of walk us through that. And then we'll open it up with a discussion with Halealoha. So if you guys have questions that throughout this presentation, or questions that you've had before, not promising that we can answer all of them during the broadcast, but please put them in the Zoom chat. Please put them on the in the comments on the Facebook platforms. Yeah, know that the ones I can't monitor all 18 cross-post sites, but I can do the Office of Hawaiian Affairs one. So if you guys have questions or comments, if you guys can place them there at the OHA Facebook and or in the Zoom chat box. Yeah, so kumuhina.
Ai, mahalo anui. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we take you down this this understanding of Mahalama Iwi Kupuna, and I too, as Mehana had indicated, I am very honored and very thankful that we are joined by none other than Halealoha Ayau, one of our most honored and esteemed of Kanaka, who endeavor to to Malama Iwi and to also pass down this knowledge to those who are fortunate to receive it. Next slide, please, Joel. So what we look forward to hearing from Halealoha in just a moment is about the history and the journey that we have come. As Hawaiians who have lived in our homelands, we have seen much change. We have been subject to many, many things. And the one thing that is the most sobering and sombering sometimes is the thought that in the afterlife, our kupuna, they have been and sometimes continue to be evicted from their places of eternal rest. Thus, we have laws here in Hawaii that currently are in place to protect our iwi kupuna and to ensure that our people have every wherewithal to advocate for them, and that we have a process of checks and balance to address the issues. So, Halealoha, might you be able to give us a little bit more on the history of how the burial laws have come to be?
Hi, aloha no kako, and mahalo for having me. So the recent history has to do with excavations that occurred for a project on the island of Maui. But before we get into Honokahua, I just wanted to, lay a little bit more foundation. So the idea of, or the unfortunate practice of disturbing our iwi kupuna, our ancestors and their burial sites, started from when Hawaiians first had contact with foreigners. So the countries that were coming to Hawaii, England, France, Germany, United States, one thing that was happening, whether we were aware of it or not, was they were raiding burial caves. They were removing remains from eroding sand dunes. There was a market, if you will, throughout the world for the collection of human remains. It was part of a larger colonial practice. So this was happening in Hawaii during the time of our kingdom. In fact, it was so prevalent that in 1860, the kingdom legislature passed a law called for the protection of places of sepulture. Sepulture is referring to a place of burial, place of interment. And so it made it a crime to remove the contents of a grave. And it was a law that was enacted by Kamehameha III. That was in 1860. Over the years, the largest area from which, the area that the largest amount of remains were disturbed from is, of course, Moku and Halealoha on the island of Oahu. And those remains, were in the possession of the Bishop Museum, but under the control of the U.S. Navy for decades. But more recently, the event that I cite as the one that reawoke our people to ourselves, to our kuleana, especially our kuleana to our family members who went before us. That, of course, occurred in 1988 at a place on the island of Maui called Honokahua. So this is in the Kapalua area. So in that case, in that situation, a private landowner was trying to get permits to build the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. And it was by chance occurrence, Dana Naomi Hall and her husband Isaac happened to be at the same planning commission meeting. And they heard the presentation on this permit. And they were, extremely concerned because those sand dunes were known to contain iwi kupuna. So when that project first started, the archaeologists said that the amount of a disturbance would be minimal, that the estimates were 40, 50 individuals, as if 40 or 50 kanaka being disturbed is considered, or should be considered, minimal. By the time the digging was stopped, 1,100 iwi kupuna were removed. In fact, it was taking so long, and the the landowner was so anxious to move this process along that they started using power hoses, water hoses to remove the iwi, because digging them by hand was just too slow. There were efforts, Herculean efforts, undertaken by Dana Naoni Hall, Charles Maxwell, Koles Kololoyo, to try and halt the granting of those permits. But their objections were ignored, and those permits were issued, and the digging commenced. It wasn't until Hawaiians from all the different islands went to Honoko'a and occupied the site, and that the governor of the state of Hawaii, Governor John Waihe'e, halted the digging at Honoko'a. By the time they had done digging, about half of the dune had been disinterred. So I guess the good news, if there is any, is that half of the iwi got to stay in place, but the other half got removed. So to make this even more disturbing, the area where the dune is was planned for a parking lot. So a parking lot for the hotel. So the heaviness of that and the kaumaha of that is that one segment of our society value the parking lot, someplace to park your car, as being more important than a place of internal interment. And so what kind of impact does that have on the psyche, on the emotions, on the courage of the Hawaiian people when they see that the larger society would rather have a parking lot there than to respect a community burial site? And so Honoko'a was this reawakening. And it's a reawakening because before we fell asleep at the wheel, we would never have allowed something like this to happen, because our people controlled the land, we controlled our resources, we controlled our behavior. We were in control of Hawaii. And once that control is taken away from us, this is one other downside of that, is the inability to protect our ancestral foundation. And so Honoko'a happens in late 1980s. The end result through negotiations was that the state of Hawaii condemned the property and purchased it, purchased just a section where the burial site is, condemned it and purchased it, and ordered the remains to be reburied, which took quite a long time because there's 1,100 of them. And so with that, event, two really important, things came about. One was the birth of Hui Malama Ina Kupuno Hawaiine. That is an organization that I was executive director of for the whole time it existed. And Hui Malama Ina Kupuno Hawaiine was the creation of Edward Kanahele and Pualani Kanakaole Kanahele of Hilo. They are my kumu. And what they realized at Honoko'a was that we as Oiwi, we had been disconnected to the practice of handling iwi kupuna, and needed to also learn how to deal with this new problem of mass disturbance of kupuna and how to put them back. And so that was one, the creation of Hui Malama. But the other, the more equally as important, was that it led to amendments to Hawaii Revised Statutes, Chapter 6E, that established the Island Burial Councils, that created a process to identify burial sites, to determine their proper treatment, to clarify the process by which inadvertently discovered human remains are treated. So inadvertent means when you don't otherwise know they're there, and those are encountered. It's a separate process under state law. It also beefed up the enforcement provisions and made it broader, made other types of behavior civil violations and also connected this behavior to the state penal code. So a lot of changes were made in order to improve the process by which we could respond to burials. But the point is that, Honokohua was where, and the events there. So even if, there was this darkness and this kaumaha caused by the unearthing, there was at the same time enlightenment that allowed us to create a format to move forward to take responsibility for the care of iwi kupuna.
Mahalo, mahalo e halealoha. So, in looking at the understanding of borough councils now that we are fortunate to have had concerted effort dedicated to making sure that we would have the ability to exercise our voice over this kuleana. Looking at the borough councils over the islands, this is sometimes a very easy discussion, and sometimes it gets complicated. But in a nutshell, the Department of Land and Natural Resources has a division called the State Historic Preservation Division, of which currently houses the island burial councils for administrative purposes. And we see that the staff from SHPD, as we call them, State Historic Preservation Division, they receive the requests for meetings for borough councils. They are also able to help facilitate who is currently on the council makeup, and they help to maintain the website that posts about borough council meetings. The Island Burial Council's primary jurisdiction is to preside over previously identified Native Hawaiian burial sites. Next slide, please. So, in thinking about what is the kuleana of the Burial Council, the Burial Council has the ability to determine whether previously identified burials will either remain in place or if they are to be relocated. It is generally the preference of burial councils to preserve iwi kupuna in place at all cost. Also, another kuleana of the burial council is to assist the Department of Land and Natural Resources with identifying and inventorying unmarked burial sites to provide protection from destruction. And the Burial Council can also make recommendations to the DLNR regarding appropriate management, treatment, and protection of Native Hawaiian burial sites. There is also the opportunity to maintain a list of appropriate Hawaiian organizations, agencies, offices, and individuals who should be in the know, who should receive notification about the discovery of Native Hawaiian skeletal remains, burial goods, and burial sites. And another primary kuleana of the Burial Council is to ensure that descendants are recognized. It doesn't mean that the Burial Council tells you who you are. The Burial Council is the mechanism that says, aha, aloha, welcome to you, whoever you are, and affirm that the Burial Council hears you, acknowledge whom you descend from. And with that in place, you have the opportunity to participate as a recognized descendant, whether it be a cultural descendant, meaning that you have ties to the Moku, ties to the region where the burial is found, or in the case of lineal descendants, that you actually have information that connects you directly to that burial. And there's more details to that, but again, the main idea is that as a descendant, you acknowledge that you awamo this kuleana, you take on this responsibility, and it is your duty now to put your voice out there advocating for the welfare of the iwi kupuna. last but not least, one of the kuleana is also to review and make recommendations to improve burial treatment plans and burial preservation remains. Burial preservation plans, known as a BTP. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide here talks.
Can I say something before you?
Yes, Halealoha.
So some might be wondering, like, why the burial council? Why this format? And so when Honokua first happens, William Patey, who was chairman of the Department of Land and Natural Resources at the time, and BLNR, creates these councils for the purpose of consulting with on burial-related issues. But the idea behind them was that, one of the most egregious problems with the situation is the living descendants didn't have any role whatsoever in determining the treatment of Iwi Kupuna. And so burial councils was seen as a platform, as a mechanism by which Hawaiians had the ability to participate. Initially, it was when they were created, it was just for the purpose of consultation, so you could just make recommendations. In other words, the agency didn't have to listen to you. It was nice, whatever you had to say, but they weren't compelled. With the enactment of Act 306, with the passage of the law that made the Island Burial Councils permanent, the authority, as Kumihina just pointed out, was enacted for the burial councils to determine the treatment of previously identified burial sites. So now it's not the state, it's not SHPD or DLNR or DOT or somebody else deciding. It is the Island Burial Councils. And the makeup of the councils is especially what is critical in the law, because the way the law is worded, the Native Hawaiian representatives, so they represent each of the regions on the island that they're from. By law, they have to outnumber the representatives of large landowners and developers. At a minimum 2-to-1, at a maximum 3-to-1. So if you have one landowner representative, you got to have at least 2 Hawaiian regional representatives. But that was by design. That was intended to make sure that the Hawaiian voice wasn't only present, but that this is about restoring control. And so this is, not by chance. So it's extremely important that this law was passed, and that people understand that the role of the burial council member is to, in effect, stand in the shoes of the descendants, where they are not otherwise known. The process of identifying lineal and cultural descendants is intended to find the families of those kupuna, to know who to directly deal with and have decisions made on behalf of Iwi Kupuna. So that's the nuts and bolts of what the structure of the council was intended. So, mahalo.
Mahalo. Perhaps we will, continue on. Here it is. In our burial council structure, we talk about composition, and we also talk about quorum. In composition, as we heard Halealoha briefly mention about, composition, you have councils that will have representation from the Moku and representation that will come from large landowners, of which the requirement is that the large landowner must have a minimum of 100 acres to qualify having a representative from that large landowner interest. There have been different large landowner representatives. Some have been very, very positive, and some maybe not so much. But overall, the intent was to give balance and to have at least a comprehensive spectrum of insight that was able to contribute to the discussions that come to burial council meeting chambers. So you see here, it says 9 total members. On Molokai, there are 5 members for the council, and there are up to 3 large landowner or developer interests. Whereas on Molokai, it is up to a limit of one. There is at least one representative per region, and that most of the islands have 6 regional representatives, while Molokai has 4. Quorum is talking about out of the total of council members that sit on the council, you need a maximum of 5 members, or excuse me, what's wrong with my English today? You need a minimum of 5 members for most councils, while on Molokai Island, you need a minimum of 3 members in order to conduct business. In observance of the Sunshine Law, which requires that borough council meetings occur in proper public manner, that you, the public, can look up on the website and say, there's a meeting being held tomorrow, I'm going to attend the meeting. And that you can be confident that the meeting is being maintained in a manner consistent with transparency and open work to the public. So that is basically the little nutshell about the borough council structure. Next slide, please. Here we are looking at the Moku for Kawaii and Niihau Island Borough Council. There is a representative from the island of Niihau. And auhea oe e kuahine noho ikamahi e o kie noho maiana ma kahili ma Kawaii Aloha Kawa. And we also have the Hanalei, Kawaii Hau, Lihue, Koloa, and the Waimea na Pali Moku designations on the island. Next slide, please. Nokaino Molokai, West Molokai, Central Molokai, East Molokai, and Kalawao. Mahalo. Next slide, please. For Oahu, we have representatives from Ko'olauloa, Ko'olaupoko, Kona, Ewa, Waialua, and Waianae Moku. Mahalo. Next slide. For Maui and Lanai Island Burial Council, which is one council, you have representation from Lanai, Lahaina, Wailuku, Makawao, Honuaula, and Hana. Next slide. And last but not least, Hawaii Island Burial Council, you see there is representation from Hamakua, Hilo, Puna, Ka'u, Kona, as well as Kohala. Mahalo, Jewel. To be a member of the Burial Council, the regional representatives must be selected from the Hawaiian community on the basis of the individual's understanding of culture, history, burial beliefs, customs, practices, and the understandings that come with being Kanaka for the region that they represent. Mahalo. Next slide, please. So to become a member, if you're interested out there, of which we are still looking for people to serve on various islands, and anybody who is interested can follow up by clicking on the link that is shown in this slide, or if not, going directly to the OHA website. So an individual applies. You can apply directly with the governor's office. You can apply directly with OHA. You can also apply directly with the DLNR, State Historic Preservation Division Office. These 3 offices then put together the applications and forward them to the governor's office. And the governor or his designate reviews them and then sends a governor's message down to the Senate committee that has a hearing. If they'd like to ask questions, if they'd like to challenge the individual putting themselves forward for becoming a member, it is everywhere with all of the Senate to do that. Sometimes those sessions are rather grueling and sometimes they're rather easy. So for those of you out there who are interested in becoming a council member and wanting to avail your voice for advocacy on behalf of the Iwi Kupuna. This here is the slide that tells you the 3 ways. Once again, you can do so here on OHA because that's the platform that we represent today on this Aloha Rising webinar. But there is also opportunity for people to submit through the governor's office and through the SHIP-D, or State Historic Preservation Division. Mahalo, next slide. So as you can see, www.oha.org/burial councils for more information on OHA's nomination process, the application that comes with that, and also the link to the Kipuka database map. You can find it on the OHA website. There is also available to folks Ho'iho i ka iwi kuamo'o, a legal primer for the protection of iwi kupuna in Hawaii nei. And that is a very useful and helpful tool that Natasha Baldoff and Malia Akutagawa had put together. And they are there for, for people to look to for reference and for information and for guidance. Halealoha, at this point, have you any supporting mana'o towards the work that you have seen done by the borough councils?
Yes. I guess the best way to put it and to be brutally honest about it is that it's been a struggle. And the struggle isn't so much on the council side. The struggle has come from where the Barrels program is administratively housed. So back in 1989, 1990, when, and by the way, I want to mention that the three principal authors of the legislation that created the Barrel Councils are Dr. Daviana McGregor, Dr. Don Hibbard, and myself. And we did a lot of consultation. The first bill was in the 1989 legislature, and that bill was killed. It was killed by a very powerful developer who had the power to make sure that legislation to protect burial sites was not going to go anywhere. That bill was revived, and there was consultation throughout the communities. Other leaders that were involved at that time included Colette Machado, Emmett Aluli, Dana Naoni Hall, Edward Kanahele, Wilma Holy. People throughout the islands who were concerned that there was this need for this bill. But at that time, Honoku'o was happening, and people were very, very upset with OHA because OHA had what's called an MOA, a Memorandum of Agreement, with the developer that not just facilitated the removal of the EV, but also required their examination, their documentation, their photography of them. And so at that time, the position was, we want the program housed at DLNR, at the State Historic Preservation Division. The one comment, and this is solely from me, it's not from anyone else, is that I think that time has come, for Hawaiians and the community in general to recognize that, there's this inherent conflict, whether we want to admit it or not. Whenever there's a Hawaiian program that has oversight by the state, you see the difficulties DHHL has. That's because the governor appoints the commissioners and the AGs give them legal advice, not always good. OHA's run into the same thing every time there's an audit. There is a need to separate out, and the program was designed with this in mind, that someday OHA would be the platform by which the Burial Sites program would be situated. To transfer it out is not, wouldn't be a monumental task in terms of complexity, in terms of legal complexity. It would be purely a matter of political will. So I am here to say that time has come. And as the chair of the Oahu Island Burial Council, you know all too well what I'm talking about in terms of the state's, just incessant interference. It's nothing else that you could call it, but interference, where they don't follow their own rules. In the Kawaii case, the state was held, SHPD was held, responsible for violating its own rules by the Intermediate Court of Appeals. So, and that's just one example. There are many. And so I believe the time has come for serious consideration given to the transfer of the burial sites program out of the hands of SHPD. And for those who think, wow, that's really out there, actually it's not. So Indian tribes across the country operate their own historic preservation offices. Yeah, there's a national organization called NATHPO, Native American Tribal Historic Preservation Officers. And I've worked with them for years. So, so the idea of an indigenous people having its own historic preservation office and being part of the planning and historic preservation review process is not novel. In fact, it's common. And it's about time that we as Hawaiians did that and removed those responsibilities from DLNR so that we can be more, we can more effectively implement the intent and the actual rules and regulations of the burials program. The Hakipu'u case comes to mind of a situation where the government is just turning a blind eye to what's happening. All we're saying is there's a process in place. We need to follow the process, but that process would be far more effective if the burials program was housed within the Office of Hawaiian Affairs rather than continually with DLNR. Back in the day when Kayana Markel and I were running the program, and after I leave, there were efforts to undermine the burial sites program financially by not funding it. And there was discussion then about transferring the program to OHA. That time has come. And in fact, that time has come years ago. And the longer that we continue this current situation, the more difficult it will be for the burial councils to do its job, to recognize lineal descendants without interference from the state, to support burial identification like was trying to happen in Hakipu'u without interference by the state. I really want to emphasize that, what happened in 1990 was a good first step. What needs to happen in 2021 is the natural evolution of burial site treatment. As Hawaiians, our kupuna never settled for mediocrity. It's just not in their DNA. Their whole world was about elevating the bar. You're constantly improving upon what you're doing. This is, in my view, one of the most important improvements to this program is to have it housed within the Office of Hawaiian Affairs and not subject to the kind of interference that we've experienced since 1990. So mahalo.
Mahalo, Halealoha. So in moving forward with today's presentation, what else would you like to say to the people that are listening? We covered some of the history of Malama Iwi Kupuna. And of course, it should go without saying for our people that we care for and we cherish our kupuna even after they have left us in this lifetime. And we acknowledge that we are descendants of the generations that have gone before us. Therefore, Iwi Kupuna and their remains, we consider them sacred. We are products of them. Iwi o ku'uiwi, ewe o ku'uewe, koko o ku'ukoko. And that is literally saying that we are them, and they are us. And it is through our works that we honor them. It is through, as you said, level of excellence. Our kupuna were dedicated to doing things not just haphazardly, but doing things well and with excellence. So Halealoha, what would you encourage our young people, our next generations, to really think about when it comes to this topic of Malama Iwi Kupuna?
Well, I wouldn't limit it just to the younger generation, but just to everyone, is to reaffirm, what you just said in terms of we are our kupuna. So if they're being disturbed, like in Mokapu, like what happened in Honokahua, what's happening all over the state, they're being disturbed. That's why we're disturbed. That's why we have kaumaha, because we're experiencing their pain, their blood, their bone is our blood, our bone. So that's, is to recognize that those connections are not only real, but they're still in place. And that we, that gives birth to this kuleana, this responsibility to do something about it. And one of the most important things in terms of our training with our kumu, step one is you have to know who you are. You have to know who all the people out there that are responsible for giving you life. Because once you have a clearer understanding of who you are, what you also then get is a clear understanding of what your responsibilities are and to whom. And so, this whole notion of everlasting life, it's nothing new to us. Every time a mele mo'okuauhau is done and you're calling down your kupuna, yeah, and you're asking them, hey, help us. We're in Cambridge. The damn train is late. The bus gonna be late. We gotta get to Cambridge. And lo and behold, we get to Cambridge on time. That when you do that, you return them to their place in the family, return them to a position of function. That's when they live on. Yeah. I was praying to my grandma Harriet Ney, like, I know Mehana's our navigator. I know she's gonna get us there, but we're running out of time here in Cambridge, and it works out. But the point is, we have to make sure that they are part of our everyday thinking, of our everyday way that we look at anything and everything. It's just, again, as he said, we are our kupuna. We are the sum of our ancestors, and therefore we are beholden to them. And so the lesson to the next generation is that watch our example, learn, take your place when the time comes. Each family has someone that was designated to malama your ohana when they hala. Restore those practices. It's not spooky. It's not any of this. It's natural. It's instinctual, and it's who we are. And I'll end with this. Our kupuna said, my kumu always says, we have to return to who we are. And I remember when she said it, someone says, oh, you mean were? And she says, no, I mean are. Return to who we are. We never changed. We're the same people. We may be confused about a lot of things, and that's what we need to clarify and be real clear about our responsibilities as OEV.
Mahalo, Halealoha. That brings me to something very important that I'd like everyone to also walk away with from our presentation today. And that is when we refer to our people, when we speak about our fellow Hawaiians, when we speak about ourselves as individuals or as a lahui, we have to be exactly that, what you just said, Halealoha, and that is that it's us. When it isn't appropriate for us to say, oh, the Hawaiians, they used to. We are those Hawaiians, and our ancestors did many things. But we must acknowledge and we must establish those connections and reaffirm them in what we say, so that when our next generations speak of our people, they're not even further removed from our kupuna. So I think that's something important for us to take home today, given the things that we've heard shared on this presentation. Again, we are those people. And when we speak of our Hawaiians, it is our people. And our kupuna used to do some extraordinarily fabulous things. And we continue to do some of those same extraordinary and fabulous things till today. So once again, mahalo, halealoha. Mehana, do you have questions for us that have been sent to us from the chat?
Yep. So thank you. Yes, thank you both of you for that. So hopefully what our audience got today was some background, you know, some historical context to where we are today, you know, why we are where we are today as far as structures and laws and those guiding frameworks that we operate from within. And also, hopefully some of you out there are encouraged to jump in, right? To see where it is that you can play a role in that, right? That this doesn't have to be just out of our hands, right? That this doesn't have to be something that, you know, that agency and all that is going to take care of. There's actually a role for the Kanaka to get involved, right? And mahalo for to both Hina and Halealoha for bringing that sentiment home, right? And allowing you guys to kind of hear that. And we're in an active recruiting phase now, right? There's always open recruitment for all the various seats on the boards, on the burial councils throughout Hawaii Pai'aina. So if you're interested, you know, there's no time then, you know, better than now to kind of come forward and make it known, right? And then let us help you. Let us literally help you through that process to go through it. One of the questions I got was from our dear friend Kavika McKegg, who I don't know if you guys got to read it in the comments on Zoom, but he's basically asking, you know, what is it that we do, especially for our near shore, burial sites, right? The places that will and probably, you know, will continue to have the most impact when it comes to sea level rise, you know, and just you know, global warming, you know, and natural effects like that. Yeah. And so he kind of asked this question, I think, that we would normally have just, you know, if we were all sitting together, we would start talking about this, right? And is what is it that we do in that situation? What is it that you guys would recommend? Do we, you know, be more proactive about it, approach the larger landowners, say for instance like KS or so forth, to already prep spaces because we know that there's going to be some you know, exposure, you know, due to just environmental
It's 3 o'clock.
and so forth. You know, what is it that we should, you know, kind of do in that case, you know, or do we kind of just take, you know, let nature take its course, you know, and adapt at that point?
If I might put in a little Olelo No'eau before we look to Halealoha for what his thoughts are. But we have found that one of the most profound Olelo No'eau that we could follow for being a part of Malama Iwi Kupuna is A'ohe Pau Ka Ike I Ka Halau Ho'okahi. Not all knowledge, not all practice, and not all methods, not all conceptualization of things are found in one school or in one home.
Oh yeah.
And with that, when we ask the question, what should we do? That Olelo No'eau should be invoked, I think, because we see different people from different islands, different moku on each island, handle Malama Iwi Kupuna in some very diverse ways. Especially here on Oahu, I have seen that. So, Halealoha, do you have any thoughts in response to what former Oahu Island Burial Council Chair Kavika McKegg is posing to this forum today?
Actually, I really appreciate the question, and I understand, you know, what Mehan is asking, and the answer is all of the above, because there's a reason why we don't have one central burial council for the whole state of Hawaii, because it recognizes that island by island, we different for the very reasons you explained, Hina. And so in some communities, when this has happened, the community said, leave them. Now they are the kuleana of Kanaloa.
Aye.
There was Papa, now it's Kanaloa. Other communities said, no, go see the landowner. Let's establish a reburial site because they're eroding into the ocean. And so that was done. So I'm glad that question was asked, because it shows that, you know, even though we call ourselves Hawaiian, we're very different in terms of how we view things. And that diversity isn't necessarily a negativity. If you ask me, it's a strength. So each Island Burial Council expresses the will of its community and of its families. And so, well, you know, in the one case where I did, you know, the Ka'u community said, leave them for Kanaloa, that the kupuna contemplated that. And in the very next community on another island, it says, no, recover them. Let's put them up Mauka. Let's go see KS. We go see, you know, the state. So the answer is whatever that particular community deems is proper for their kupuna.
Oh yeah. That's a good lesson, actually. That's a good lesson that we can take across our cultural practices. Yeah, that we were very regional, and there was reasons for that, and good reasons, very practical, make sense kinds of reasons, and even beyond that, it was the responsibilities of the caretakers, those people who lived in those areas, you know, to be able to function in the best way that they could. So yeah, mahalo for that. You know, we have another question. This one is coming in. It says, please help me understand the terminology of previously identified burial finds.
You want me to answer that? Yeah.
Yes, please, Halealoha.
Yeah. So previously identified is actually specifically defined in HRS, HAR 682. So a previously identified burial is one that's either identified through oral testimony or historic documentation, which is what is happening in Hakipu'u right now, or identified through an archaeological inventory survey, where the burials are in place. Previously identified, if it's Hawaiian, then it falls squarely under the jurisdiction of the particular Island Burial Council to determine whether to preserve in place or relocate. For non-Hawaiian remains that are previously identified, then the law says DLNR makes that determination. So families, you know, if there's any important takeaway, is to know that you have the right to go to the Burial Council and provide testimony, oral history. My tutu told me under that hollow tree is tutu so-and-so, supported by historic documentation. If there are maps indicating burial areas, and ask the council to review the veracity of the testimony and recommend to SHPD to identify these as previously identified burial sites. All other burials are considered then inadvertent, and inadvertent means they are determined by the Department of Land and Natural Resources, and the window by which they make that determination is very, very short. So the idea is you want to get these cases before the Burial Council so that there can be a proper presentation of information by the families and consideration of whether to preserve in place or relocate.
Right, because the end goal is to malama iwi kupuna. It's not to stop development, to forward development, to answer a myriad of questions that surround, you know, the environment of our iwi kupuna, right? Yeah. And that's why these measures or these approaches to handling it that way.
It's also intended to re-emphasize the importance of oral tradition. We come from an oral tradition society, and yet we've gotten away from that. And so oftentimes when a family would stand up and explain something that was taught to them, you know, people say, well, you know, prove it. They just did. They proved it through the responsibility of sharing that information for purposes of protection. Now, I know some people out there thinking, wait, that's very sensitive information. The law also allows the family to go to the Burial Council and say, I want the information regarding description and location of the burial site kept confidential. So when we discuss this part of our testimony, we want you to close the meeting. Only have our family and the council present. If you register your burials with the SHPD, you also have the right. There's an exception to the Sunshine Law that allows for that information to be kept confidential. So what we try to do with the law is as much as possible is infuse cultural traditions so that we're not compromising our responsibilities. You know, we're not going to have the kupuna in order to malama them.
Yeah,
Mahalo.
and as you were saying that, what it made me think of is that this is probably the last frontier where, I mean, we testify, you know, in front of different bodies, right? We testify in front of the legislature, we testify in front of the BLNR, you know, and places like that and all the commissions. But if I'm understanding you correctly, this type of oral history, right, and the acceptance of it, the validating factor of it within the burial councils, this is probably the last frontier where that's actually a thing, you know, where our oral history is being elevated, you know, to that level of importance, right? And I don't know, I mean, and Hina and Halealoha, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm trying to think of all the different phases where, you know, Kanaka will come forward and give, you know, give evidence, you know, and it be taken as that, you know, in that phase. Maybe I'm making a bigger deal than it is, but when you were talking about it, I was just like, wow, that's right, you know, and especially information that's usually kept so close, you know, to Ohana, you know, and the measures that have been taken to codify or create a space that doesn't breach that tradition within this burial council process and shipping process is a good thing, you know, is a good thing. Just said one more. No, a lot of people are liking what you said about Oha. As from Oha, I have no comment on that, but you know, that's definitely. But thank you for, you know, for as being a subject matter expert in this, you know, specifically in this, you know, in this field for so long and done the work. You know, I take that with. As a really not only legitimate but really good, you know, good suggestion and advice, you know, for the future. Yeah, Kumuhina.
I'd like to say to the people, having had my years of experience in this area as well, and that is that in today's climate in 2020, we have many issues that impact our community. And these issues range from Aloha Aina issues, what happens on our land and our seas, how our resources are used, are people having access to all the things that we need in our homeland and not necessarily having it. There's so many things, but when it comes to Malama Iwi Kupuna, sometimes the discussions get very, very specific and very nuanced, especially when they are in forum of the Borough Council and when there are really technical discussions that take place. Just the fact that, you know, you can have a group of people involved in conversations that span months long, you know, journey. And then if you're gone for a month and you come back in, you know, you might have to do a lot of picking up. But for the general public that sees things, I request that you always ask some of the critical questions and that we as Kanaka elevate ourselves and our thought process to be more analytical and be more aware that sometimes it isn't always as it might seem, and it isn't always as easy as one might think. So when it comes to Malama Iwi Kupuna, I am very thankful that we have people like Halealoha Ayau, who are Kanaka, you know, Kanaka representation that has contributed so much to our lahui when it comes to this monumental effort to stand up and to wear that mantle of Malama Iwi Kupuna.
Mm.
No small, nor simple task. So I'm very honored that Halealoha, you decided to join us today.
You know, we had a question about hakipu'u. Do you guys know what the status is as far as
Halealoha?
kupuna?
Yes, the Okumitu family had made a specific request, and I know that because I did it for them, to SHPD to be on the September OIBC meeting agenda for the purpose of the council assessing the testimony that they had already submitted, both oral testimony and supported by historic documentation in the form of a PowerPoint, to establish 2 separate burial areas on 2 properties in Hakipu'u. SHPD did not agendize the matter, nor did they bother to respond why they did not, which is partly why I was motivated to recommend the transfer of the program, because that's the very kind of interference I am referring to. So the effort again is going to be to identify the burials there up front, without subjecting them to excavation, based on the Olelo no Ayau mai kaula ina iwi kala. So if we're not supposed to kaula'i them, and we have a way that we can establish their presence without digging them up, then that's the primary way this should be done. And Kumuhina read all the responsibilities of the program, well, one of which is to maintain this burial inventory. You're not maintaining a burial inventory if you're not actively engaging when families come forward and say, yes, we want to disclose this very sensitive information so that these burials are not being disturbed, because in both properties, those properties got, there was clearing, there was land clearing. And so there was concern about possible disturbance of those 2 burial areas. And so the status is that we're still trying to get the Fukumitu family still trying to get onto the OIBC agenda. Hopefully that will happen in October, so that the Burial Council can exercise its responsibility and its authority to assess the legitimacy of the testimony that was submitted and the documents, including a map indicating the burial areas or area, and make a recommendation to SHPD to identify these as previously identified burials. After that, if that is done and SHPD agrees, then the matter comes before the OIBC for a determination to preserve in place or relocate.
Mahalo. I see, Mehana, do we have more time? People are asking more questions.
You know, so it's about 3:15 now. I'd just like to be respectful of our guests. Halealoha, I don't know if you have, you know, we don't want to hold you, you know, past the time that we told you. So are you okay to answer more questions or to discuss anything more? So we touched on Hakipu'u a little bit, right? But and we started with the burial laws here in Hawaii. What's I think this is this might be a, you know, a loaded question, but like, what's on the horizon as far as, you know, all the things are happening all over the place and all over the world. Yeah. For you two, what's the next, you know, the thing that's like kind of right in front of you as far as some things regarding Iwi Kupuna that we, you know, that the lehu lehu should be aware of and we focus on?
Mahalo, Mehana, for that question. A very quick answer on my part is that we as a community need to pay close attention to what's happening on Maui. And of course, in the Kanaka schematic of who should be first line response to it, it should be our ohana on the island of Maui to take that kuleana on. And it is being addressed. One of the prominent individuals in this discussion is Ke'ea Moku Kapu, and he is currently engaging in the Iwi Kupuna issues that are happening there in West Maui. And they're not easy discussions. There's a lot of details that go into what's happening, the processes that can get involved when it comes to development, when it comes to jurisdiction over Iwi Kupuna and the parcels of land that they're on. But I can tie this into something that was asked by, who asked this? Oh, this comes from a viewer. This talks about traditional ways of recognizing ohana, and not by going by Shipti format, but by Kanaka. And here is something that is key for people to understand. In order for the existing laws and the existing process to not only be invoked, but to be effective, one has to sort of map things out the way that process has it mapped out in order to invoke that process. Again, a burial council can't tell an individual out there that you are who you are or you aren't who you are. You are who you are because you determine who you are and because you should know your genealogy. And I hope that all of our Kanaka, after this webinar, go out there. If you don't know your genealogy, research it and try to know it better. But sometimes we find ourselves, especially at the burial council level, our fellow Kanaka want to come in and resolve political issues, issues of sovereignty, issues of political control and political jurisdiction over many things, including but not limited to Iwi Kupuna. And so those discussions aren't necessarily the most appropriately addressed in the forum of the burial council. A burial council is primarily for the matter of Malama Iwi Kupuna. And sometimes, we've had people who want to remind the burial council of those things, but again, this is a format that exists in a particular context, and that context is burial council. Currently, it's housed in Shipti. Even if it was housed in Oha, again, this is a process, and it's important for everybody to remember, that invoking the process and looking for an outcome from that process requires people to observe it and work as well as we can with it, because it can be very effective. Do you feel that our burial council process has been effective, Halealoha?
Oh, absolutely. And not just effective, but that it's a safe environment for Kanaka to come in and engage on such a sensitive and serious issue. So let me try to answer Mehana's question in two ways. One, so the Maui case that comes to mind that really needs attention, that proves my point about why the program should not be in the LNR, is Maui Lani. So in Maui Lani, you have a phased development in the sand dune area. Phase one involved Iwi Kupuna being disturbed. So when you start building phase two, you cannot treat the burials you find there as inadvertence, because you already know that they're present in the dune. But SHPD now is, 100-something inadvertence. That undermines the very logic of what an inadvertent is. Inadvertence means you have no idea they're there. But after maybe 90, I'm pretty sure you have a good idea that they're there. But yet they treat them as inadvertence so they can move them and facilitate what the landowner's activity is. And the Maui Burial Council, the Maui community has been just screaming about this for years. But the state just, carries on. So that would be one case that demands attention about the way SHPD is handling it, because in my view, it's not following the law. In terms of what people out there should also know is that this problem is all around the world. Mehana, you and I were in Germany and England earlier this year. Our kupuna are in countries all around the world, especially in Europe. And we are in the process now of planning an 8 or now 9 museum repatriation effort, because it's expensive to go there, as you know. We don't have the means, the resources to just be flying back and forth. We got to figure out where they're all at and then go one time and get them all. And so we're in, thank goodness, for the works of Kanakana Ferreira. I hope you're listening. Who was just an outstanding researcher, outstanding advocate. Kaiana Markel, outstanding advocate. We have the means to address this problem. And what we also need to also do when we return them, as we did in the Cambridge case, is then post notices so that families know that iwi kupuna have been returned. And if they are ohana or believe that they are from the same area and wish to participate in their reinterment, that they do so. So just know that they're still all around the world. And the worst part about this problem is we have no way to gauge how well we are doing because we have no idea how many of them they took. And so we're talking about museums and agencies. We've also been able to repatriate from individual families, but that's on a case-by-case basis. Some families don't want to give them back. I mean, we're dealing with a guy in Denver, Colorado, who refuses to return a Hawaiian skull. So the point is, there's all these situations, cases where these kupuna have been taken, and they need to return. You know, when I just want to end with this. When I was in law school, I studied federal Indian law because, you know, my passion was to work on sovereignty-related issues when I returned in terms of practicing law. But towards the end of my time in law school, I was clerking at the Native American Rights Fund, and I worked on 2 federal Indian cases involving iwi from the Pawnee Indian tribe. And that's what shifted my focus from, you know, restoring the nation to, well, we got to restore the foundation of the nation first, which is what my tutu, you know, told me to do. You know, she said to me, but she said it kind of, you know how they talk in these, I don't know, hyperboles or whatever. She said, in order for the building to be restored and to stand strong, the foundation has to be firm.
Oh, yeah.
So I didn't know what the heck she was talking about. And I thought maybe she didn't take her meds or something. I was teasing her. And she says, no, what I'm telling you is, if your goal is to restore the Hawaiian nation, then restore its foundation first. They took our kupuna. That's why we cannot stand tall again. Restore that foundation and the rest will take care of itself. I was like, wow, not bad for McKinley High School.
You know, that's I was just going to say, I was like, oh, that reminds me of how when I talk to you, Halealoha, yeah, talking in all kind, you know, hyperboles, and I do the same thing. I tease you too, you know, but wisdom, right? Yeah, and one of the people in the chat earlier on in the chat had actually put that olelo no el, yeah, no ke kahua ma mua, ma hope ke kukulu, you know, and how well that we've, you know, come down in the discussion, you know, to that exact lesson, right? That our iwi kupuna, because we kanu them, you know, beneath our feet and return them back to Papa. They are Papa. They become Papa. You know, they become the foundation from which, you know, everything else emanates. You know, from that. Yeah. Wow. My God. Now all the questions is coming in, of course. You know, because get 4 minutes left. You know, before 3:30. Let me take one more, and this comes in from. Kahu Makuakane, you know, he says, would it be logical to raise the effectiveness of the burial councils by setting legislation that will give these councils sole determination of iwi kupuna and the right to vote yes or no to lands that hope to be developed?
That was my exact thoughts in 1989. And then we went to the legislature. And we dealt with large landowners and developers who says no. And because again is the fear that somehow it was going to negatively impact development. So the burial law was never intended to do that. But has it had that effect in some cases? Absolutely. But that's not the intent. The intent is it's a planning tool. So if you're a smart landowner, You plan well ahead, so you know what you have to deal with. And then once you know if there's kupuna buried there, like what KS did to some of its lands, is they just plan around it. They leave the kupuna alone, protect them, and plan around them. So that it doesn't, the point being that it doesn't have to be a win-lose situation.
Right.
It can be a win-win situation. The Honoakaha housing project across the Makai of Waihala Church is proof positive, where instead of building over the entire property, they built 3 or 4 stories up to protect the corner of the property that had 250 plus graves in place rather than forced disinterment. So there can be creative solutions, but you got to work at it. You got to work at it. Everybody got to be on the same page. And as Kumuhina always says over and over and over and over at these meetings, you have to be respectful in the way that you communicate your point. You don't have to agree with each other, but you have to be respectful of each other, especially if it's respectful of the context and the forum in which you are operating, which is the Burial Council.
Right.
Aloha.
That's great. Hina?
Yes, so to Halealoha, something that Halealoha emphasizes greatly in the arena of burial council and the issues that come before councils is that there are many times where a great level of discipline is required of our people, especially when it comes to our kupuna. There's nothing that can push us to the edge like an issue talking about our beloved ancestors, those whom we come from. And people will fight. Some people will kill. For, you know, if you threaten somebody's kupuna from a Kanaka perspective, that's literally an assault upon us, who we are, and in fact, in traditional times, to remove somebody's iwi and to do exactly what the Olelo no Ayau says not to do, when you kaula'i them and you leave them in the sun, that is the way you hurt people the most, at least Kanaka, and it is a part of our culture. So to have discipline in the case of Malama Iwi is really about understanding that discussions are complex. Sometimes they're not easy. There's multiple viewpoints, especially because we don't all come from the same Kanaka culture anymore. And as we navigate these roads that take us down some very difficult and challenging times for many issues, we must have discipline, and we can't always give in to our emotions. It might hurt, but we have to channel those emotions to drive us towards the end goal, which is honor, respect, and aloha paid to our iwi kupuna.
You know, and on that note, and on what Halealoha just said, there's one of the most beautiful lines from a pule that Halealoha actually taught me, that goes, ho'omau kalokahia kako, right? And then therefore, if we do that, if we do what you both are just saying now, right, then we come full circle, right? Ho'omau kalokahia kako, and we persevere on, right? When we have that understanding, right? When we realize that we are doing the work that actually brings us the living honor, dignity, you know, the lessons to our children, you know, beyond that, then that's the big lesson, right? That's the Havina Nui, that's the Mana'o Nui, you know, of it all. So yeah, you know, it's 3:30 right now. We have gone, you know, so fast. That was a quick hour and a half. I'd like to thank the Lahui. Thank you guys for staying with us for this time on these very important topics. I know, sorry, there was some questions that we didn't get to. They were kind of all coming in kind of rapid fire, you know, towards the end. And I didn't really see, I saw a lot of comments on Facebook, but you know, I couldn't get to the questions there either. One last thing, where can they find information about the burial councils? Where is it located? What is the SHPE website that it's on?
Yes, you can, mahalo Mehana for that question. You can go first and foremost to the OHA website, oha.org/burial councils, or you can go directly to the State Historic Preservation Division website, and you can just simply type your into your search engine, State Historic Preservation Island Burial Councils, and it will take you to the website and provide you with the updated information as well as the updated vacancies that require filling. And since we're on that note, I'd like to say that the portion of my presentation earlier did not specifically refer to the current vacancies, but it was speaking to the overall seats that are able to be had on the council and what it looks like on each island. So just to clarify that. Mahalo, Mehana.
No, mahalo. So again, mahalo e kalahuie, right? Mahalo for all of you for joining us today. Want to send out a special shout out all the way to Hawaii Island. I think are you still sitting in the compound in Panaeva, Halealoha?
No, I'm
Or are you on Molokai?
quarantine.
Oh yeah. My kai for wherever you are, for the work that you do, for the kaumaha that you carry, for on behalf of all of us, mahalo nui for sharing your time today. You're amazing, Ike, of course, unmatched, o'oino, ka helu e kahi, no ke ia hana nui, ano laila e mahalo nui. Maya mako no ya o e halealoha ke o no ke kane e lana mali e maka honua o no e kumuhina o ke kahi mahalo nui he hana nui ko ya me ke ia ano hana mau he mau papale o no e kau maluna o kou po'o, ke kahi o ka manawa, hana oi ma oha, ke kahi manawa, aia oi ma ka Island Burial Councils, ke kahi manawa he kumu oi, maluna ona haumana, mana pa'ahau, ma na ahupua alike ole o ke ia pai aina. So nui ko umahalo ia oi, ke kahi e kumuhina, no ke ia. So now everybody knows you can always go back to this if you wanted to, if you missed some of the presentation earlier, especially it'll be archived here on the OHA Facebook page, so it won't leave there. And you can watch it at any time or contact one of us if you need further assistance. From Aloha Rising, remember everyone, this is just part of our civic engagement, right? The next step is always action, right? It is to be informed and then to act upon that, because that's the way of our people, right? We don't learn and then sit back, right? We learn and then we do. So hopefully this was an opportunity for everyone to see their role with this particular issue. But yeah, we're always, down that road on Aloha Rising. The rising of our Aloha comes when we are able to act upon the wisdom that we have gained. So mahalo, everyone. Until next week, Thursday, same time, same place here at 2 o'clock. We'll see you again. Ahui ho kako.
Oh yeah. Aloha.